I declare open the public hearing of the Standing Committee on Education's inquiry into building Asia capability in Australia through the education system and beyond. I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area, and pay respect to elders past and present of the Indigenous peoples across Australia. This hearing will be broadcast and the transcript of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I might just invite members of the committee present to introduce themselves.
I'm Zee Soon, the member for Banks in southwestern Sydney.
Kate Chaney, independent member for Curtin in Western Australia.
I'm Karina Garland, the member for Chisholm in Melbourne.
And my name's Tim Watts. I'm the federal member for Gellibrand and the chair of this committee. I now welcome representatives from the Asian Australian Voices to give evidence. For the benefit of Hansard, if you could please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee. We might start from that end and proceed across.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Jun Tong. I work as an economics advisor at Mandala Partners. Thanks for having me.
My name's Jennifer Su. I appear in my personal private capacity, but I'm an adjunct associate professor at UNSW.
My name is Wei Li, so I'm also appearing on my personal capacity as part of the Asian Australian Voice Program participants, but I'm an academic member of the University of Sydney Business School.
Good afternoon, my name is Danielle Rajendram. I'm the Director of Advisory and Insights at AsiaLink Business.
Good afternoon, I'm Jasmine Batra. I'm appearing as an individual capacity. I'm the Managing Director of Arrow Digital and the founder of Big Leap Accelerator Program.
Good afternoon, my name is Lydia Santoso and today I'm appearing as Chair of the Australia-Indonesia Institute.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and it has the same standing as proceedings of the House. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion? Have you prepared opening statements? Yeah. Okay. All people have opening statements? Yes. I think we might go left to right again, or my left to right. Apologies. Thank you.
Of course. Chair, capability must begin with cultivating cultural interest and attention. If the goal is to maximise Australia's opportunities in Asia, then it's worth thinking about what we'd like the future to be. More trade, certainly, more investment in both directions also, but underpinning that, a greater exchange of people between Australia and Asia, an intimacy that should reflect our proximity. That means more Australians living and working in Asia, choosing Singapore over London for that finance career, picking the Mekong over the Seine for that gap year. There are already hundreds of thousands of Australians living and working in Asia, and it is those Australians who form our capabilities today. They know the language, the knowledge, they have the familiarity with norms and mores, which I argue we underuse and undervalue. That diaspora, rare to hear from Australian diaspora, but that diaspora proves there is Australian engagement and interest already, and it's cause for hope. We in the room will agree that the food and cuisine sector is a place this inquiry can take inspiration from. There we see a prosperous exchange of people and capital and success. It wouldn't be a bad starting point to point there and find out what is in that secret sauce, or as us Malaysians would say, in that ketchup or sambal. So how do we build on and expand this success? 3 suggestions. First, talent. We can better use that Australian diaspora in Asia. For example, the public service should consider valuing Asia capability more seriously, especially in its senior ranks. If the government believes that this is the Asian century, then this should be reflected in our bureaucracy. By setting the example, government can tilt the glow of prestige and status towards Asia. In many fields, it is still the American and British and European experiences that draw the eye. It is still the London Bureau, the Washington office, the postdoctoral fellowship in Oxbridge that our high achievers covet, and we should change that. Second, our schools can teach students something more basic than language. They can teach Australian children where we live. Teach them that our region's culture is that teach them about our region's culture to cultivate their interest in our neighbours. Young people will only master languages if they have an opportunity to fall in love with the culture that speaks it. Third, we can put our artistic institutions to work. State screen agencies can support productions to tell stories about Asia and for Asian filmmakers to tell stories about us. And in music, perhaps something a bit more bold. We can host our region's version of Eurovision. On the steps of the Opera House, you can all see it now by Sydney Harbour broadcasting to the world talent from India to Indonesia, from Thailand to Japan. There's much to be excited about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I should also have said that as we have 6 people, before you speak, if you could identify yourself for the purposes of Hansard, it'll just make it easier for them to prepare the transcript. Dr. Su.
Thank you. Jennifer Su, Adjunct Associate Professor at UNSW. Good afternoon, committee. Today, I speak to you as a mother seeking to ensure my child's cultural and linguistic heritage is part and parcel to their upbringing, and as author of the Being Chinese in Australia reports for the Lowy Institute's Multiculturalism, Identity and Influence project, now completed. I have seen firsthand the evolving sense of belonging amongst Chinese Australians. Over 3 years, these reports and surveys show that Chinese Australians' connection to local communities and Australia deepened alongside improved Australia-China relations. Through focus groups, I observed how individuals navigated these broader dynamics, reinforcing that Australia's China and Asia capabilities must include our diasporas, not as a starting point, but as an existing strength that needs to be genuinely included in national conversations. My experience highlights a disconnect between Australia's potential as a diverse, well-educated nation and its low ranking in the Harvard Economic Complexity Index, currently 105th out of 145 countries. Despite proximity to Asia and a vibrant Asian Australian diaspora, Australia's economic integration with the region remains shallow. Our participation in manufacturing and regional innovation hubs in the region, innovation hubs is limited compared to countries like Vietnam. Even with high enrolments of Asian international students, our university's global standing hasn't translated into deeper industrial or economic ties with Asia. Central to addressing this gap is building Australia's Asia capabilities. The Asian diaspora is a skilled entrepreneurial asset, but migration alone doesn't guarantee the language and cultural skills needed for meaningful engagement with Asia. Heritage language retention drops off sharply among second-generation Asian Australians, particularly as school commitments increase and language learning is deprioritised outside the core curriculum. Comparisons with places like Edmonton, Canada, where I lived for 7 years teaching political science at the university, reveal that Australia lags behind in offering bilingual education. With only 3 English-Chinese language bilingual schools in Sydney, compared to 7 in a much smaller city of 1.2 million. Family efforts are insufficient. External factors such as limited school options and the pressures of mainstream academic achievement often outweigh language maintenance. Government action is vital. Embedding Asian languages and cultural studies from preschool through to high school would foster the awareness and readiness needed to engage with our region. Such a policy would signal the value of these skills for career and economic outcomes. Additionally, partnerships between government, private sector and educational institutions, such as scholarships and cooperative programs tied to industries with Asian exposure, could further build this capability pipeline. Ultimately, strengthening Australia's engagement with Asia requires a whole-of-society response, embedding language and cultural learning across the education system to secure Australia's prosperity and relevance to our region. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Wei Li. Chair members, thank you for the opportunity. I speak as an Australian of Chinese heritage. I'm a researcher, an educator, a former international student, and a mom. So two priorities will guide my presentation and also my written submission. First is broaden our benchmarks, and second is we need to fix the trust gap for international students. First, I believe Asia capability is more than just language. Many Asian Australians already bring deep skills and real networks that open doors and lower risk in Asia. I introduced the first MBA module in my university. It went beyond the MBA China module. So it went beyond just site visits. For 3 months, our students worked closely with 6 Chinese companies on their globalization strategies. So they saw how Chinese firms actually operate, and more importantly, they collaborated with real Chinese executives. This is Asia capability in action. We should support programs focused on people-to-people collaborations, where students can learn business, culture, history, politics, and religions. And we should better use Asian Australian staff, especially women who remain underused leaders, through more targeted leadership programs so that deep Asia capabilities can be leveraged for Australia. Second, I believe universities have a big role to play. We train the people who will work in business and in public sector. If universities don't teach applied Asia skills, Australia just won't have them. Right now, the system is bipolar. Asia is siloed in language and area study degrees, where most other programs still use mainly Western cases and applications. We need to change that. If government link performance funding to Asia-assessed learning, universities will deliver. Asia capability needs to be embedded into all programs so that not just large corporations, but our small business, our farmers, and our remote communities can benefit from the rise of Asia. Third, we must treat international students as partners, not revenue. There is evidence shows that many are isolated and anxious, especially under the current media and policy setting. Based on my own observation, trust is fading on campus. Domestic students struggle to find housing, and they blend international students. Yet many of these international students are scholarship students and future leaders of Asia. We should rebuild trust, put domestic and international students in mixed teams to solve real Australia-Asia problems, and provide stable policy environment. Finally, I believe we need structure and accountability. A permanent Asia capability government body can set clear targets, fund programs, track outcomes, and provide continuity. Do these Asia capabilities move from niche to normal, and we get better jobs, stronger institutions, and deeper ties with our region? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Danielle Rajendram, Director of Advisory and Insights at AsiaLink Business. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this inquiry. I've spent much of my career working at the forefront of Asia-Australia engagement, both in think tanks, in government, and now at Australia's National Centre for Asia Capability. This experience has given me a deep understanding of the attributes and capabilities that Australian businesses, in particular, need to compete in Asian markets. Asian markets are dynamic, diverse, competitive, and businesses require persistence, long-term planning, and sophisticated Asia capabilities to succeed in these markets. However, Asia capability in a business context is about much more than just building language skills. Businesses need to develop familiarity with Asian markets, they need personal relationships in the region, they need cultural understanding and the agility to adapt their products and services to Asian consumers and conditions. Too often, Australian businesses are not investing in building these capabilities, and they tend to be domestically focused, risk-averse, and put off by public discourse which focuses too much on the challenges of operating in Asia. To compete in an increasingly contested international environment, Australian businesses need to build these capabilities at scale. AsiaLink Business has been at the forefront of developing these capabilities since 2013, and in this time we've reached more than 110,000 individuals. We've gained valuable insights into what both builds and sustains Asia capability at scale. Our most successful programs of work really focus on identifying, sharing and connecting examples of successful business engagement. They combine awareness-raising activities with knowledge building and the development of practical skills, and they tailor activities to reflect individual business appetite and sector-specific skills as well. Government has a critical role to play both as a champion and an enabler of these capabilities and needs to view Asia capability as a strategic national asset. For Australian businesses to thrive, government needs to secure a bipartisan commitment to building Asia capability within the Australian workforce and develop a coordinated national strategy to develop Asia capability. It should convene a high-profile group of Asia capability champions within the business community and showcase their success stories to build the confidence of other businesses. And it should invest in substantial long-term initiatives through a dedicated National Asia Capability Fund. Importantly, government should continue to work closely with industry partners, business groups and ecosystem enablers like AsiaLink Business to continue to equip businesses with the tools, resources and relationships that they need to succeed in an increasingly contested environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm Jasmine Batra. My background is in opening international markets for innovative technology companies. Through my accelerator program, The Big Leap, I've helped Australian and Indian founders, startups, scale across the border. I've seen firsthand when it comes to Asia capability, language is only part of the puzzle. Deals are won or lost on culture. A real-life example. I was leading a delegation of Australian tech founders to India. As we walked into this boardroom for a meeting in Bangalore with some senior government officials, one of the founders just walked up and inadvertently sat at the head of the table. Unaware, in that context, hierarchy decides where you sit. And it signaled ignorance of the culture setting that he was hoping to build business in. To advance Asia capability, I recommend 4 actions: recognition, relevance, readiness, and rigor. To build and recognize Asia capability as a sovereign skill, as vital as STEM, building accountability through national KPIs and building transparency through annual reporting so we can track progress as a nation of our national, as an Asia capability. Making Asia capability financially relevant. Currently, demand is framed largely as a language issue. It will grow when Asia capability is linked to career advancement, jobs, and innovation. Incentivizing companies that invest in cultural literacy through CPD credits, tax offsets, or training grants. And building readiness through structured learning to mandate cultural briefings for delegations supported by digital playbooks localized to the destination. In India, for example, all the different states have very different cultural languages, so having one India strategy doesn't really cut it. And just like risk and ethics briefing, it should be made mandatory for all delegations that go out. The US Foreign Institute Service and EU's Cultural Relations Platform offer a strong precedent. Australia can build its own model, co-designed with diaspora. And finally, rigor. Right now, state trade offices operate in silos overseas, duplicating missions, sending mixed messages. Creating a national overarching body like an Australia Capability Council will bring together DFAT, Austrade, industry, job skills, state offices together under one shared Asia capability strategy that will align federal and state policy and certify programs beyond universities and delivered through chambers of commerce, diaspora groups, and accelerators. In closing, on his first visit, the founder misread the signals. And I learned facilitating international market access isn't just about product validation or price testing. It has to be a lot about cultural understanding. And now we have a module, which is a compulsory module in our accelerator program. And we are seeing the shift taking from guesswork to actual informed engagement with Asia. So it's these skill sets that turn beyond language our capability of turning lost opportunities into lasting prosperity. Thank you for the opportunity and welcome any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Santoso and I am the chair of the Australia-Indonesia Institute. I speak today both professionally and personally as a lawyer specialising in Australia-Indonesia matters and as someone whose own life is the byproduct of the Australia-Indonesia relationship. My Indonesian father came to Cessnock, New South Wales as a Garuda cadet pilot. There he met my Australian mother, and I grew up between Jakarta and the Hunter Valley. That upbringing, though not without its challenges, gave me what I now call my superpower: the ability to bridge cultures, languages, and perspectives. Despite Asia accounting for more than 60% of our two-way trade, our Asia literacy and language capability have fallen to crisis levels. This is no longer an education issue. It's an economic and national capability issue. Australia's future prosperity depends not only on our access to Asian markets, but on our ability to engage confidently within them. Reports and rhetoric are no longer enough. It's time for national resolve and structural reform so that the next generation of Australians are not just looking toward Asia, but they are speaking its languages and also shaping its future alongside our neighbours. First, we need structural coordination at the national level. Education may sit with the states, but Asia capability sits with our national interest. I urge the establishment of a national body tasked with creating a national roadmap for Asian capability, aligning DFAT with departments of education, employment, and giving them measurable national targets. Second, let's scale what already works. Programs like Achichis, IEP, IMEP, Chair, you're very much well aware of those programs, and the New Colombo Plan are proven pathways that produce regionally fluent graduates. Immersive and virtual exchanges should be mainstreamed and not marginalised. Third, we must act urgently to save our Asian languages. In New South Wales, the Bahasa Indonesian Extension course was almost cancelled this year, rescued only through community and stakeholder intervention. I propose a national Asian languages guarantee, ensuring sustained funding and embedding Asia-capable competencies into the Australian curriculum and scholarship programs. Fourth, we must connect the dots across government. Austrade's landing pads are welcome, but without linguistic and cultural understanding, our businesses are still hesitant to take the leap. Our investment data shows this. Asia capability should be treated as a national capability, as essential as cybersecurity and defence. The Nicholas Moore report made 75 recommendations, and recommendation number 1 calls for greater Southeast Asia literacy across business, government and education. It's now time that we act on this recommendation. Finally, we must harness our greatest untapped asset, our diaspora communities. They already embody the bilingual, bicultural fluency that Australia needs at scale. Without immediate action, we will end up with fewer bridges, fewer storytellers and fewer deal makers who can actively and operate comfortably within our region. I'll expand on these points in my written submission, but thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for those opening statements for all witnesses, and I also want to acknowledge that witnesses here today are participating in the Asia Society Australia Asian Australian Voices program. which is designed to ensure that Asian Australian voices are part of the national conversation, and there is no better place to be a part of the national conversation than the heart of Australia's democracy here in Parliament House. So thank you for your participation today, and thank you to Asia Society Australia for what I think is an important program. Ms Chaney has time pressure, so I want to pass to her for first questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Given that we're in the Education Committee, I'm really keen to hear other ideas on how we can incorporate Asian capability in the education system beyond learning languages. I think learning languages is the most obvious answer, but I'm keen to hear other answers that you have, and some have come up, but if all of you, anyone who's got a comment on that.
In New South Wales, we have a Premier's Reading Challenge, and one idea that I've had, which is economical, is to have some Indonesian or Asian literary books translated into English and put onto the Premier's Reading list, and also just being able to use Asian examples across the sector of the curriculum. So geography, or urbanisation, we could use Indonesia as an example. So just trying to bring in Asia examples across the curriculum.
Yeah, to add to that was like running simple things like Asia Capability Labs, which are run outside of classrooms, taking it into the workforce, and again, incentivizing those groups which are delivering these programs as certified micro-credentials, which still give that career advancement, and it is counted as their CPD credits, and then linking it to that economic advantage.
So as part of tertiary education?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Anyone else? No, go for it.
So my suggestion is to start right from the preschool age up. Like, the language and cultural studies need to be fostered at an early, young age. Otherwise, parents are going to make, like myself, the cost-benefit analysis. Do I want my kids to excel at sports, which is valued in Australian society, or do I want him? At the moment, it's an either-or option, right? As the child gets older, the pressures become, and the extracurricular activities and core curriculum activities become greater and greater. And in my conversations with Chinese heritage parents and with for-profit Mandarin schools in Sydney, they see a big drop-off in language enrolments from Year 2 onwards. So they have the biggest enrolments from K to 2 for Mandarin language learning, but after Year 2, that really drops off because parents now prioritise having their kids excel in maths or English or, all the other core curriculum subjects.
And so do you have a suggestion for how to counter that?
So some schools have decided to provide after-school language as part of out-of-school care, but again, that is a cost issue for many parents. And I would say have language and cultural studies in the core curriculum. I know education is a state issue, issue, but I think if there is enough incentive for state public schools to introduce language into the school curriculum, then you're going to see an increase incentivisation for parents to have their kids in cultural and language studies outside of school as well, because the state has made that signal. This is something we prioritise.
I got a few points that I can share, particularly focus on the higher education sector. I think firstly, I agree with Jasmine's point. So that was my point about the program's focus on people-to-people collaboration, that actually where students can learn, business, culture, history, politics, and religions. I think those programs should be encouraged more, and also there should be cases of, spotlighting good cases, so that across Australia or the university is able to run them in their program. I think secondly, is the empowerment of the Asian diaspora communities. When I look at my university, actually, we have large amount of Asian background academics as well as staffs working in the university actively. But I believe that was ANU back before the pandemic. There was a report actually looking at academic and professional staff across Australian universities and the representation of Asian heritage people in the management team. And I think that was a key concern in terms of looking at across the board in the management team, there's very little Asian representation there, or in the sense that people are concerned that the representation is too low. So I think that links to the idea of actually Asian Australian assets are part of the Asian capabilities. I think they need to be empowered. And I speak particularly from a woman perspective as well. I think we have a lot of discussion on gender equity, and we have a lot of discussion on racial discrimination in this country, which is really very good. I think Australia is leading the world. I think another area we can lead the world is actually look at the intersection of gender and race. When I look into the government report on gender equity, I think race have been only mentioned once. So it would be great to empower those great Asian diaspora community, particularly female, that they can play a bigger role in this. I think the third thing is that at the university level at the moment, there's lots of discussion about AI, particularly we talk about AI fluency, and I think that's coming from a Texas requirement that we map our curriculum on AI fluency across all the program. And I don't see any reason why we can't do that for our Asia capabilities as a Texas requirement to say, we need to map our curriculums and we need to look at our programs in what areas are we actually teaching our students, right? Coming from all sorts of different economic backgrounds, from urban areas, from rural areas, how much are we teaching them about Asia capabilities? I think finally on that point on New Colombo Plan, so I have some experience with it. I think it's a great initiative and particularly the funding they're putting into it. But as more inspirational, I think at the moment the funding is an annual funding application. I think that actually sets some constraints on institutions actually working on this kind of programs, and also in a way that kind of mentorship, how can be carried out. One of my colleagues actually told me about the example of Rotary Club. I don't know whether anyone of you have heard about their program. So Rotary, mainly are English-speaking kind of mobility, but the benefit of that is a multi-generational kind of support and mentorship, that the older one is able to support the younger one. I think that's what continuity and stability and predictability is a great way to build up capabilities in the end.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Dr. Garland?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for your statements and your insights. Something I think that came across very strongly in every presentation was the importance of the people-to-people connections. And, we are a very multicultural and diverse society here in Australia. And it seems to me from listening to what you've said is that perhaps we're not utilising the diversity and the multiculturalism that exists in our communities. And that goes all the way from the earliest years of education right through to higher education. We have students from many different countries. We've got people studying internationally, not just at universities, but in our primary and high schools more and more, and of course teachers with different cultural heritages teaching in schools. So I wonder how we could use the existing kind of cultural makeups of our educational institutions, of our communities, to get that better cultural understanding and, as I think a number of you have said, embed that cultural literacy into the curriculum more. So whether that is, I think there was an example given, when we're teaching about, we're doing case studies, make sure that they're more regionally appropriate for us. I love the idea of Asia Vision as well as Eurovision, by the way. But it just, it kind of seems to me like in many ways we are a very successful multicultural nation, particularly with Asian communities, yet we're obviously missing something in terms of how we're really, I think, maximising the people-to-people relationships that already exist. So just wanting to get some insights about how we better do that within those educational frameworks.
Perhaps I might begin. Dr. Garland, our old workplace, the University of Sydney, might be a good microcosm to begin with. There's a hard, I guess, the hard suggestion, the softer suggestion. The hard one is that government has tremendous control over the direction of research, and researchers drive teaching through ARC and HMRC grants. We have a world-class university sector, but that sector is built on deep and high-grade connections to America, to Europe, to Britain, in some respects to Asia too, but that could be improved. And so without sacrificing its strengths, how can we use those grant and funding levers to send our great researchers to work and live in Asia and come back and continue the tradition of teaching and research back home? That's a well-worn academic pathway that you and I are familiar with. The softer way is cultural. Like many Group of 8 universities, the leadership of the University of Sydney is still deeply embedded in American and British systems. The moment we get a Vice-Chancellor who has spent their career, it'd be great to have a Vice-Chancellor, let's say, who spent her career in Japan, in India, in Southeast Asia, before coming back to run a Geo8 university. That sets a tone and sets a culture that the action isn't just on the West Coast, it's not just in the Oxford-Cambridge triangle, it's also in our neighbours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you also to the witnesses for sharing both your magnificent professional expertise, but also your personal stories, personal insights, and the expertise that comes alongside it. Echoing the Chair's remarks as well, I did want to thank the Asia Society Australia for bringing together the Asian Australian Voices initiative that gave me the opportunity to meet many of the witnesses earlier today, but as well as many of those in the gallery as well. My question is just in regards to how we can make sure any kind of future endeavours in building Asian capability, whether it's cultural in the language base, succeeds where its predecessors have not. I'm referring to, of course, some of the big historic pushes from some of our predecessors, including during the Hawke Keating era, and then subsequently during the Prime Ministership of Julia Gillard, where we did talk very actively about the Asian century. I guess from the experiences that your collective experiences, it'd be good to know, well, how have you seen the context change since those previous attempts, but then also the new opportunities that you've seen from your programs that might lead us to be perhaps more successful in our endeavours this time round.
Can I, my answer kind of dovetails with Dr. Garland's question about education. I think we need to look beyond, I know you're the Education Committee, but it's a structural issue that spans not just education, but migration and the economy. So according to Harvard's Economic Complexity Index, Australia has only added two new products in the last nearly 20 years compared to Singapore's 12, right? And that has only added $4 per capita in 2023. So it doesn't, there's an incongruence between the increasing number of Asian international students in our universities. Our universities are highly ranked in the QS and Times Education rankings, but we have such low economic complexity index. Why is that? I know the government has a Future Made in Australia program, agenda and legislation, and that is the first step. The industrial policy actually matters. The industrial policy needs to speak to the education curriculum and educational outcomes. So I think they need to be interlinked. And I also talk about migration because in the focus groups over the last, in the 3 years that I did the Multiculturalism Influence Identity Project at the Lowy Institute, time and time again, the focus group participants expressed their concern, the uncertainty in the pathway to citizenship from being an international student, and should they choose to be on the pathway to citizenship, it's long and arduous. And in that time, they can't really deploy their skills that they've learnt at university. So, and that's lost years, lost skills, lost assets for Australia. So I think all of that needs to be tied together, and they're all interlinked.
Sorry. No, thanks. I would echo that point around requiring integration between the different areas and the different capabilities that you are looking to build when you're thinking about Asia capability. Building these capabilities is a really long-term endeavour, and it requires both funding and concerted effort that does take that long-term approach and is really, integrated into other government priorities as well. So finding those ways to link the building Asia capability into other endeavours, into the education system, and taking a very long-term approach where you're able to both focus on language skills, build cultural understanding, and build people-to-people connections, as well as the skills that are required for businesses, communities, educational institutions, and Australians as a whole to succeed in Asia will add to the potential of succeeding in this particular challenge.
I'd like to make a comment, just on your question. I think when I reflect on what has changed, to the Hawks, many years ago when we talk about Asia capabilities, is our society and our economy has shifted. So when we look at the amount of Asian background migrants that are in Australia, I think we are now reaching at, based on the last census, 17.1% Asian heritage, Asian migrants in Australia. The second thing is that my research actually focuses on Asian investments into Australia, particularly, with one of the participants, Helen, here, looking at Chinese investment into Australia. So over the last decade, China was one of the major kind of investor in Australia. And that creates a lot of opportunity for our students, like my MBA student, to work with Chinese companies on their globalization strategies. I think the same is happening with all the Asian countries as well. And recently, I'm actually working on a new project on Chinese migrant entrepreneurs. Again, they move away from the traditional opening restaurant in Chinatown, grocery shop. Now they're in technology, in renewable energy, which have been talked about a lot in today's question time, in climate change area, in AI area. So that actually provides a lot of kind of collaborative projects for our students to work on that I think they will be very happy to work with them. So I like to say that it is to position this inquiry as it is the right moment, because we do have all the ingredients and the fabrics that are there, but we just need to leverage them more, and we need to empower people who have the capability to stand up and do more.
Thank you. Can I ask for a personal perspective? I know a number of witnesses have spoken about their personal investment in this and the desire to pass down Asia capabilities and languages from generation to generation. Can I ask about your experiences of doing that? I think there was one quote from Dr. Su that family efforts are insufficient. Can I ask for personal experiences about pursuing language studies yourself, like how you obtained language skills, and your efforts in passing that on to the next generation, and whether that is adequately supported by education systems and by government?
I have an observation to make on that based on some recent conversations with the second generation migrants, like those who did not learn the language growing up. And now with AI, it also seems to them that, you can just talk to a Google translator and get the language. So that reframing of it as more than just a language to ask for directions and as embedding into a culture, and also reframing it from a soft skill and as a nice to have to a professional competency which advances them and their life goals. The younger kids are worried about jobs. They're worried about how what their future looks like. So if we can link it back to how this gives them, opens new pathways for them, that will, I think, bring more people in the fold who have just taken technology as the answer to not learning new languages.
The reason I ask this question is it's a bit of a provocation, because sometimes we hear the idea that we need to break the bamboo ceiling to increase the participation of Asian Australians in the institutions of power in our society, in leadership positions, and that is important. But some people make that argument as though it is sufficient for the Australian Asia Capability Challenge. I know from personal experience that building that capability down the generations, like maintaining it and developing it, is challenging. I'm interested in your personal experiences in confronting these challenges. Sorry.
I can share. My daughter wanted to learn Indonesian at school, and her school didn't offer Indonesian. And we then looked at distance learning to see whether she could take that up. But they don't offer that until year 9. But she wanted to do that in year 7. And despite all my efforts and trying to think outside the box in terms of making it work, we were unable to enrol her until year 9. So that's 2 years of lost opportunity and lost learning. She learnt French for 2 years in that space, which has, she can't speak a sentence in French. But now she's doing that. But I think that's an opportunity for distance learning. And it also, I went to school in Maitland and I studied Indonesian through distance learning, and it's a great opportunity to reach regional Australia. And now with technology and AI, there's an untapped resource there to be able to get to the Australian community through technology and distance language learning. Time in country, I think, is really important, and I would love to see exchanges come back to at the high school level to hook in the students at a younger age is just crucial. New Colombo Plan is fantastic, but it's too late, I believe. We need to bring that much younger. And exchange. I did it with the Japanese. Learnt Japanese and had an exchange students come and stay with us, and just learning through having them stay with us in our house just really unlocks those cultural sort of barriers, and I think that's a really missed opportunity as well, and I'd like to see that come back.
From a personal perspective, my Asia capability journey is probably a little bit unusual. So my father is a Sri Lankan migrant, and he never taught me any Asian languages. I never learned Asian languages through that family acquisition pathway. And it was a part of my kind of culture and heritage that I didn't grow up with a great reference to my Sri Lankan heritage. And I attended university, studied Asian studies, and tried to build my own Asian capabilities by learning Japanese. I learnt Japanese for 4 years at university, including a year in Tokyo on exchange at a university there. And really, what that demonstrated to me is that Asian languages are challenging. Asian languages take a lot of time and investment, and trying to acquire them late in life and trying to acquire them in a short period of time is not sufficient. With my own children, I am trying to really just drop they're very young at this stage. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm just trying to drop the kind of green shoots of interest into their lives. So teaching them a little bit of katakana, teaching them how to write their name in Japanese, teaching them a few Japanese words. And I think in terms of building that interest and building that sense of what could be valuable and what could be worthwhile investing in, I think starting from that really young age, building it throughout the curriculum, building just those opportunities and those areas of exposure to Asia is the thing that is really going to compel people to invest in their own capabilities, because really it is an investment on a personal perspective. It takes a huge amount of time and energy and effort, and having as many support structures and as many areas of interest around that language acquisition, I think, is the way to encourage that going forward.
I would like to just add a very. So I recently, I'm in regional Queensland at the moment, and it's a small community of Indians, and within that Indian community, there are, we have, as you know, with different states, different languages, Tamil, Telugu. I come from the Sikh background, and there are very few families, and I would like my that next generation to learn that language. It is not offered in any state public schools. And for the kids, because of music, Punjabi music, I'm not sure if you knew Diljit Dosanjh when he came here.
He rocked on the weekend.
he rocked the place, and people have got familiarity with the music and the language. And what we are doing is through a small temple, a gurudwara we call it, we are trying to build that language learning from little kids, so they are aware, and they have grown up here. They don't understand the language. They don't have anybody else who speaks that language also, because the grandparents, it's not it's a nuclear family, not unlike India where they grow up with grandparents. And funding of such initiatives, which are regional, diaspora-led, local languages through a state or a federal body would make a huge difference in making that connection to that land and building Asia capability with interest.
I want to make a point. I think even my earlier point about Asia capability benchmark should be more than language, but I totally agree with your point on language. Particularly, I think language is important, particularly for primary schools and high school kids, because there are quite a lot of evidence research to show that language is actually also shaping someone's cognition skills. So I think when we look at a lot of the Asian language, the difference is not just about how we pronounce it, how we write it. So for example, Chinese is based on symbols. So once you learn the language, you have a different way of thinking at things and looking at things. And I think that kind of mindset is particularly important for our young kids, because that's when their minds and brains are shaping, and it is something that is very important to develop at an early stage, so that they're able to work with more complex situations and bring up our scores for the Harvard Index. I think the second point is that it's just anecdotal evidence that I heard from colleagues that are actually grew up in Finland, and he's of Hong Kong heritage. His parents migrated to Finland when he was not yet born, but he grew up in the Finland school. So he was able to speak Cantonese very fluently, which for me was a very big surprise, because to be honest, I struggle, like Jennifer, to actually teach or ask my son to learn Chinese. So I asked him, how are you able to speak, Cantonese growing up in Finland, which I don't think there's a large community there. So he told me the system is that if you are in a Finland public school, even you are one person that comes from a different cultural heritage, and the government by law or by policy requires there's a language teacher of that cultural heritage to teach that kids that language in the school. So he was the only one come from Hong Kong backgrounds, and he's the only one getting that. But some of his friends are interesting, might actually come and join. Yes, I think there's a part of it is I felt like one of the reasons why my son he doesn't want to learn too much Chinese is because of the peer pressure. So I do think that language learning should be happening within the school rather than outsourced to some of the community body to run it. I think that will be part of the ecosystem, but the school needs to play a major role. And as part of federal policy can mandate is to say, at least someone is coming from their cultural heritage. There should be some capacity of their kids learning that language in that school.
We need to
Miss Mr. Soon's just trying to jump in. Can I?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Chair. And thank you also again to the witnesses for sharing particularly your personal reflections on the next generation within your families. I have to admit, it's something I'm personally pondering at the moment with my 11-month-old red-headed daughter and how she can engage with her own Asian heritage as an Australian. Look, one of the things you identified is some of the challenges in that space, and particularly around language acquisition, and you identified some of the barriers from availability of teachers through to the cultural context of which that learning historically has happened most effectively. Another bit of anecdotal feedback I hear is around some of the incentives within the education system around learning languages, and some of the stuff, for example, in secondary education, I hear from community members, but also more broadly, is there is a bit of a disincentive because it's seen as native speakers have an advantage in secondary courses, and so therefore they might not be as competitive in order to achieve the marks that they need, which way contribute towards their outcome at the end of their schooling. So there seems to be some feedback of that concern. And then kind of linked to that in the higher education space as well, if you do decide to study a language in higher education, it's seen as very difficult, and therefore once again potentially affecting your WAM or your GPA, and therefore for employment prospects later, you may choose not to go down that path despite its actual benefits because of its potential impact on your employment prospects as well. Yeah. I guess from the witnesses there, is that something that you've heard, that you've seen, and is this something that needs to be looked at alongside all the other barriers that you've mentioned?
Mr. Soon, that is a crackingly good question, and I think it dovetails nicely with the Chair's provocation earlier. I think the uncomfortable conclusion is that language is important but not necessary. Not necessary in the sense that there is little demand for it. So if we look at where is demand for Asian languages, you might think, is there demand to do business overseas in Asia? And the answer is no. The answer is that Asians speak much better English than some of us do. Is there demand on our shores? And the answer is no, because speaking personally here, but migrant children pick up very quickly in the schoolyard that the key to social success is to lose the accent. So it doesn't help to hang on to the accent. And so we might think, well, maybe language doesn't matter. And I think we all in this room, that feels wrong, and because it feels uncomfortable. Because language is good for, not needed for transactional ties, but critical for enduring ties. And I think this room is invested in building those enduring ties, because that is where we get all the externalities and all of the benefits on the long-term strategic basis that we care about. And that presents a conundrum because, as you say, what are the incentives to learn a language? And the only conclusion that we can come to based on the data, based on our own personal experiences, is that people need to fall in love with a culture to learn the language. They need to want to know the language to speak to their families and friends. They need to want to know the language to live in the country that they're besotted by. That is a hard problem to solve with public policy, but I think it is the plain conclusion.
Can I build on that provocation and mutually provoke? It's an interesting one because you could look at our engagement with the region historically as being transactional, largely commodities-driven trade. More shallow engagement in a strategic and a defence sense, and that perhaps in the past that was okay. In the future, our economic engagement will become more in providing services to the growing middle class in Asia, health services, aged care services, financial services, education, in-country delivery of these services. Our diplomatic and strategic engagement becoming deeper and more complex. So, we've just in the last couple of years signed defence agreements with Singapore, Japan, Indonesia, India. Talisman Sabre had 19 countries participating this year. So it may well be that we were able to get by in the past without it, but the more is being demanded of us in future, and we need to fall in love quickly to be match fit for the coming years.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, so our top export goods are still primary goods. We don't don't do anything. We don't metallise, we don't make ships with the iron ore. I mean, if the products that we are sending overseas are a bit more complex, then obviously it would feed into the innovation hubs, the economic hubs in Southeast Asia or the Indo-Pacific, and therefore people here would need to acquire some sort of, technical language skills, right? So I think it's also thinking about our economic structure and where we place those emphasis in, not just sending primary goods, but actually process.
Regrettably, I feel like this conversation is only beginning, but we are coming to time, and in this building, the room bookings are pretty firm. Can I thank you for your attendance today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and we'll have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. As I say, I feel like the conversation was just beginning. I have many questions that I propose to provide on notice to the group that you can respond to at your discretion. Can we ask if you can please provide responses to any questions taken on notice during this hearing to the Secretariat by close of business on Friday, 21 November 2025. On that notice, thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much for the evidence you've given here today. And I declare this hearing closed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.